Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. From websites and online stores, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Something that I really appreciate about the Squarespace Gallery feature is that it has automatic image scaling, which means all of my work looks super cohesive and professional, no matter what size the file is. Not having to worry about reformatting my images every time I want to update my website makes it so much more streamlined and efficient. And adjusting and moving elements around is so intuitive and it updates instantly, which is perfect because I am very indecisive, so this helps just make the process a lot quicker. And this also applies to other forms of media as well, such as YouTube videos and your Instagram feed. As someone who creates artwork as well as videos, it's really important for me to be able to showcase all of my content in one place. So if you're interested in launching your own website, head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/imawonder for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Hello friends, I hope that you've been well. To start off, I decided to include the digital sketching process as well as me picking out the color palette for this piece, which I did on my iPad using Procreate. After I'm happy with the sketch, I print it out and transfer it onto my painting surface, which in today's case is a wood panel. So for those of you who are not familiar, this is a series of videos that I've done on my channel where I show real-time process of me painting or working on a piece, and over the voiceover, I answer a bunch of your questions. So of course, the digital process that you saw here was very much sped up, but all of the footage you'll see when I'm actually painting is all in real time. Nothing has been sped up. It has, however, been edited down for a more concise viewing. I think from sketch to completion, this painting actually took closer to 3 hours as opposed to the under 1 hour final cut that you're going to be seeing here. So like I said, throughout the process, I will answer some questions that I received from my followers on Instagram as well as my subscribers on YouTube. I delegate the first third of questions to be related to art and career, followed by questions related to general life stuff, and then lastly, I save all of the fun questions about music, fandom, pop culture for the end. So without further ado, let's get into these questions. One medium you enjoy but don't think you're particularly good at. So last year or so, I became totally enamored with handmade clay earrings. I watched a bunch of videos on how to make them. I purchased a bunch of supplies and then proceeded to make a small batch of earrings once or twice, and then I have not touched them since. I just have never found 3D creation to be my strong suit, and there's definitely a huge learning curve with it that I have yet to overcome. But hopefully I can try and find some time to try it again, because it would really be such a shame for all of those supplies that I bought to go to waste. What are your top favorite art mediums? In no particular order, I would say watercolor, gouache, and I'm going to say regular gouache and acrylic gouache is classified as one, colored pencil, acrylic paint markers, and alcohol markers. What is your go-to subject when you're casually drawing in your sketchbook? It would probably come as no surprise, but it's definitely going to be portraits of women. And another subject I actually really enjoy as a default as well is fan art portraits of male characters. I don't know why I have this particular distinction, but that just seems to be what I gravitate towards right now. What currently inspires you the most? Inspiration for any given illustration is always going to have multiple sources, but I will say that I have been particularly into what I've recently discovered has been called the Danish pastel interior decor aesthetic, which is of course comprised of pastel color palettes and lots of retro feeling elements like checkered patterns, flower icons, and wavy forms. Danish pastel is a term that seems to be mainly targeted for interior decorating, but I have definitely been carrying over that aesthetic into my artwork. This whole vibe is especially evident in the painting I'm working on in this video. What are some of the things that you like about acrylic gouache versus typical gouache? So with acrylic gouache, I use this particular blending technique that is best used when a paint is drying permanently. And you'll see this technique that I'm talking about throughout the process of this video actually, particularly for the blush areas around her face. So as an example, after I've put down the first layer of skin tone, after it's dry, I'm able to put down a blush color of paint on her cheeks and nose, and then with a clean wet paintbrush I can buff out the edges to create a soft gradient. This is a technique that I use with watercolors and inks as well, but it's definitely the most difficult to do with regular gouache because you run the risk of disturbing the layer underneath when you use too much water. And another benefit of acrylic gouache is that you can use really diluted layers of paint to create transparent / like glazing effects. Again, this is only something I can do because the paint underneath has been permanently dried. But of course, the really frustrating thing about acrylic gouache that, it's drying permanently is that it also is going to be totally permanent in your mixing palette. So that's always a shame because I hate wasting paint. So a huge benefit with regular gouache is that even when the paint has dried on the mixing palette, I can re-wet it and use it again at any given time, even weeks or months later. So both of them definitely have their pros and cons, which is why I use both, just depending on the piece or depending on my mood. When using nylon hair versus natural hair brushes, how long does it take before you need to replace it? And can you use both types of brushes with gouache / acrylic gouache? So the timeline of when you need to replace your brushes is going to vary from person to person. There are so many factors such as how rough you are with them, do you clean them well after you use them, how often do you paint, what's the quality of the brushes in the first place, do you require precision or are you loose with your art? I personally don't use natural hair paintbrushes very often. I almost exclusively use synthetic, but I would only recommend that you use natural brushes with watercolors and regular gouache. If you want to use a brush that is going to be versatile for multiple mediums of paint, I would definitely recommend synthetic ones. I noticed for watercolors and gouache, using tap water can sometimes transfer mold into the paint pans, but using distilled / filter water does not. Did you ever have this experience? I have heard about this through lots of different people advising using distilled water, especially for jelly gouache to avoid mold, but I have actually yet to experience any mold in any of my paints and I only use tap water, so it's been okay for me so far. Any tips on how to approach starting a new unfamiliar medium? I would say if it's a slightly more complicated medium that you're not familiar with, like oil paints or ceramics, I think it would be a good idea to look up some videos online or take some courses or classes depending on the medium and your budget. Certain mediums, like the ones I just mentioned, do have certain things about them that require some knowledge to use correctly. But if it's a medium like colored pencils or watercolors, I think you can get away with jumping in spontaneously to get a feel for the medium. Obviously, you can watch videos on those mediums prior to as well, but I do think that there is a joy of discovery when you go in sort of blind. I would also say that even if you do choose to watch videos and get instruction from another artist, I'd highly recommend to learn from multiple artists rather than just one. There's so many varieties of ways to approach any medium, so it's good to get multiple perspectives. And lastly, don't be afraid to experiment and use the medium in a new way. That's how you find your own voice. And, just because an artist used the medium to achieve one look, that does not necessarily mean that's going to be the right look or technique for you. First, art supply splurge. I believe it would have been when I purchased my very first set of Premiere Prismacolor pencils in high school. I believe it was a set of 48, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few of those color pencils are still ones that I use to this day. And yeah, it's always been one of my favorite mediums, and I've never encountered a colored pencil that's been quite as pigmented. How do you feel about self-portraits, both about yourself and in general? I think self-portraits are great. I think it's really interesting to see how an artist perceives themselves. I personally don't do self-portraits very often, but I do really enjoy seeing other artists' interpretations of themselves. I'd like to ask how you plan out the elements in an artwork. Do you know pretty early on what background, what a character will be wearing, etc., or is it more organic and you work on the character and it all organically falls into place? I'm just really interested in how you get from sketch to finished product. This is a tough one to answer. It really varies depending on the piece, but generally I do have some kind of vision before most illustrations, whether it be a specific aesthetic or mood, theme, etc. For more complex illustrations, the more planning and research that's going to be required. I do have a video that I did a couple of years ago that goes through my planning, sketching, and painting process for an illustration. I will have it linked in case you want to watch it, because I think that'll be a better demonstration of what I mean. As an artist who works at a desk for long periods of time, do you ever deal with back, shoulder, or muscle pain? If so, how do you deal with it? Yes, I have definitely run into this issue. A couple of years ago, I invested in not only getting a more comfortable office chair, but I also got a standing desk as well. A more comfortable chair is a given, but having a standing desk, I think, has made a big difference for me. It's good to just have the option to stand, not only to have some variation posture so you're not sitting all the time, but I also find that when I'm already standing, it encourages me to stretch or move around periodically more often. And when a good song comes on, I'll even pause to do a little dance, which I feel like is just not going to happen as often when I'm sitting. And then with wrist and arm pain, that definitely comes from when I'm just straining too much from drawing or painting. So that just means for me, I need to take a break. And I know that there are some videos out there for wrist and arm stretching, so I think that's good to look into if you're finding it pretty severe. Do you think people tend to underestimate how much work goes into creating art? Do you think making videos about your process helps in that regard? Oh yeah, definitely. I feel as though people who don't make art think it's super easy, and artists who are very new are constantly looking for a secret shortcut. It's interesting because I've noticed that depending on the person or the video, the response has gone both ways. Some people will see a video and recognize that they need to be more patient and take their time with their art process. And then on the flip side, there's other cases where people think that my artwork comes together really effortlessly. And I think that's because with YouTube videos, they're typically, sped up and they're obviously very edited. So it looks like it comes together really quickly. So either way, I just try to present my work in a way that feels the most authentic to me, and people are going to interpret it in their own way no matter what. Can you go into depth about how you feel / what you think about people redrawing your artwork with and without credit, and if that includes for personal use, like a sketchbook no one will ever see? So in all cases, of course, I would like my work to be credited if you choose to copy or heavily reference my art. I totally understand and am flattered that people might want to try and learn from my artwork. And I definitely have done a similar thing with, old masters, as well as plenty of anime / manga creators from when I was in high school and other sources of inspiration. With that in mind, I've created a number of illustrations in the past specifically for Draw This in Your Style events, where I am inviting people to do their own interpretations of these specific pieces. So of course, those are free game. I've highlighted them in my Instagram stories for people to refer back to. But when it comes to people copying any and all of my artwork to post online, that's where I become a little bit more uncomfortable with it. I think because I've had cases where someone copied my artwork, they posted it online, and then they were mistaken as the original artist, and it just creates a lot of confusion. So clearly crediting the artist is very important, and ultimately I can't control how these things are going to snowball, and I just have to be confident and secure in my own work, and just comes to terms with the fact that I can't control what happens after I've posted something publicly, and I just have to hope that, my voice and my vision is going to conquer, any potential copycats or whatever. Do you ever wish you could change your channel name or channel profile picture? There have definitely been cases where I wish I had used my actual name for my channel / brand. I think in a lot of ways it'd be easier, but I think I'm in too deep and I've just kind of accepted the imawonder username. As for my profile picture, I actually have been thinking of changing it really soon. I absolutely love the one I have right now, but it is from 2019, so I think it's finally due for a change. I've been debating whether I should just recreate the same drawing, do a self-portrait, or use an illustration of my character Momo. How did you manage your time in art school, and how did you deal with burnout? I was terrible with time management when I was in school. Not only did I have a part-time job, but I also, frankly, partied a lot. I honestly have no idea how I managed to do well in school while also just being kind of reckless. So I guess I really took the work hard, play hard memo to heart. What are your income streams for your art? My most consistent form of income is my Patreon page, followed by YouTube ad revenue, which obviously fluctuates depending on how well or poorly the videos do. Then I also do sponsorships with brands, which are usually videos, but occasionally will be Instagram posts/stories. And then my online shop. And lastly, affiliate programs, which is when someone purchases a product through one of my links and I earn a small commission from it. So I really like to have a diverse stream of income just in case, one of them is not as prosperous as another. And that way I just feel a little bit more secure to have a lot of different options. I'm the only artist in my family, so they don't really understand. How do you deal with that? For me, I stopped trying to seek approval from my family and instead made the point to find community and support elsewhere. When I was younger, I didn't really have a lot of art friends in real life, and so I eventually turned to online art communities, and now more than ever, that is so much more widely accessible. Whether it be Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc., there are so many platforms now that allow you to connect with other people and create your own community. But beyond that, if you really love creating art, you do have to be your own cheerleader, and hopefully your family can, come around and see that it's something that makes you happy and they can understand. How do you help yourself if/when you feel bad about your art, whether it's comparison to others, stuff not going well with engagement, or thinking I'm not good enough? This definitely happens to me all the time, and while I was just mentioning how great the internet is for being able to access these art communities, of course that can lead to a lot of comparison and, seeing all of the engagement, whether it be good or bad. And so something that I've tried to stop doing is scrutinizing all of the analytics, because while in some ways it can be helpful to view these numbers, ultimately I was finding it was doing more harm than good. And obviously there are certain numbers that are unavoidable, like how many or how little views I receive on a video. But overall, I try my best to focus on the positives, such as, the really nice comments that are being left by all of you, and try and look at those as opposed to being concerned about how few views the video got. And another way of giving yourself a confidence boost is to look at really old artwork that you made. I find that this allows you to really see how far you've come as an artist, and it has nothing to do with social media or anyone else, just your own personal growth. Ultimately, though, we all go through these waves of imposter syndrome, but I think it's comforting to know that you're not the only one who experiences it. Are there any aesthetics or color palettes you really love but are completely different from your style? For example, I wear a ton of black and gray, but I love neon and bright colors. So for me, I think I'm in constant battle with myself over my two favorite aesthetics, which are on the opposite sides of the spectrum. It will come as no surprise to most of you that I love color and pastels. This is something that I incorporate into my artwork a lot, as well as in my home decor and my fashion sense. But then on the flip side, I also really love dark and vampy aesthetics as well, which is literally the opposite of the cutesy pastel vibe. So I do try and find ways to sometimes incorporate the two together, but other times I just have to pick one or the other depending on the situation. If you could restart your art journey, what would you do differently? In terms of the art side of things, I wish I had spent more time doing figure studies, which of course is something that I can still do now, but I seem to have a hard time bringing myself to do it. And then when it comes to my actual art career, I wish I had started taking social media more seriously sooner, but ultimately I'm fairly happy with where I'm at career-wise, so I can't really complain too much. What are a few of your unpopular opinions about art? So I don't know if these are necessarily unpopular in my actual art community, but I think just overall, the first thing that comes to mind is that using references for your art is bad. This is not a bad thing. I don't know why people seem to think that. All of the old masters from art history would have live models and they do plein air paintings all the time. So why would it be bad for you or I to use photo references to make our work? I just don't understand that mentality. And then the second one would be that more realistic art equals better or more skilled. Like, yeah, of course, it is impressive when someone can create photorealism, but there is also a lot of skill and creativity required to stylize something and make it visually appealing. There is validity in all forms of art, they just require a different skill set. Do you ever question if you made the right career choice? Have you ever thought about working in another area? When I'm particularly stressed out over the business side of my job, or if I have low engagement, yes, I definitely question if this is the right career choice. There is so much to learn and juggle when you're totally independent. Not only are you an artist, but you're also a product photographer, a social media marketer, a video editor, etc. You have to have an immense amount of self-discipline because there is no boss or someone overseeing you to make deadlines. And then on top of that, because you have nobody else working with you, you have no one to rely on if something goes wrong. It can be pretty overwhelming sometimes. But ultimately, I really can't picture myself doing anything that is not related to art. And I'm a pretty restless person, so I think being able to switch from multiple different types of tasks is actually more engaging for me as opposed to only doing one thing. And I hate having people tell me what to do, so I definitely love being my own boss. How do you balance your work with your quote-unquote normal life? Do you have troubles with it? This is something that I used to be really bad with, but I definitely think I've gotten better over time. Setting boundaries and reminding yourself that it is not sustainable to overwork yourself because then you'll just burn out. I think, having a work-life balance is really important. And so generally, I try to avoid working on the weekends and evenings. This also means not looking at emails either. And of course, this isn't always exactly how things go. Sometimes I will break those quote unquote rules, but I think the key is to just really make sure you actually give yourself a break, just like anyone else would at a typical job. How's the weather in Canada? Down here 2 days ago, it was 70 and right now it is snowing. Oh yeah, the transition period between winter and spring is definitely like that for us, at least in Southern Ontario. We're constantly flipping between snow and warm weather. Not only is everyone confused on how to dress for any given day, visually, it also just looks so gross because most of the snow has melted, so it's all just dirty and slushy, and spring actually hasn't hit yet, so we don't have any of, the greens growing in yet. So yeah, I'm ready for this weird period to be over. How have you been doing recently? Globally, there is so much going on right now, so that is difficult to take in. But on a personal level, I actually have been doing so much better than I was a year ago, and I'm really glad about that. You said in your studio vlog that you're moving. When is that happening? Yes, I get the keys to my new apartment April 1st, so it's right around the corner. It's going to be a very hectic month or so while I try to move, settle in, and keep up with all my work, but I'm really excited about being in a new space. What kind of vibe are you looking to go for in your new space? Like I was mentioning earlier, I've been really into this Danish pastel aesthetic, so there will definitely be lots of color and cute decor items, which I of course have already started to accumulate in my current place. And so, for my studio, it will likely to continue featuring lots of pinks and blues. And then for my living area, I've actually been eyeing this velvet dark emerald couch, which definitely leans into my more dark and vampy interests. But I think with pairing it with all the kind of surrounding elements being pastel and gold, it will sort of marry my two aesthetics together. And yeah, I've come to realize I'm very much a maximalist, so there's definitely going to be a lot going on, and I'm perfectly okay with that. As much as I would love to be, a Marie Kondo minimalist, I just realized that's just not who I am. What is your favorite breed of dog and or cat? I think obviously when you're a pet owner, it's more down to actual personality rather than breed. But I think in terms of actual look, I think corgis are the cutest thing. I just think proportionally they are hilarious and ultimately you just can't avoid how adorable they are. And then for cats, I have a soft spot for calicos. I just think the 3 colors is really unique and I just love that. Will you ever get a cat? I love cats so much, and I continue to go back and forth whether or not I want to get my own, because previously when I had roommates, they both had cats. So I don't know, maybe in the future, but right now I'm leaning towards not, just because I have so much going on. What is your favorite candy? I'm actually more of a chocolate person. Like when I think candy, I classify that as like gummies and hard candies. But if I had to pick a favorite candy, I think I'd have to go with fuzzy peaches. If you drink bubble tea, what's your favorite flavor? I do really like bubble tea. I feel like I kind of switch up what I like to order every time I go. But right now I've been really enjoying brown sugar tapioca. So anything that has that in it is my go-to. What did you eat for Lunar New Year's? I had bansao. Yum. My friends and I got together and we ordered dim sum and had lychee/mango cocktails. It was delicious. How have you personally changed since high school? I've definitely gained so much more confidence in myself. Obviously, it's not perfect and I still struggle with my self-worth and value, but I have come a very long way from the way I used to view myself. And as an extension of that, back in high school, I was very self-conscious about advertising my interests that were deemed quote-unquote weird or quote-unquote uncool. But now that I have gained this confidence in myself, it has also allowed me to embrace my interests with very little shame. Like, I'm just able to enjoy the things I want to enjoy, and that is very liberating. What do you do in your free time? On my own, I watch a lot of YouTube and TV shows, as well as I've been reading a lot of webtoons/webcomics. And then as for my social life, I really enjoy hanging out with friends, whether it be like a night in with some takeout or going to a restaurant/bar. And when the weather gets nicer, I look forward to going to the beach, having picnics, and overall exploring the city. What's your favorite quote? I don't remember where this is from specifically, but it's something along the lines of, if they think I'm too much, they can go find less. I think this applies well to many aspects of life, whether it be romantic or platonic relationships, as well as your career. We're often conditioned to be overly accommodating or to feel ashamed when we are being quote unquote too much, and thus we restrain ourselves from being a certain way. I think that it's so important to be able to live freely as your authentic self and have people appreciate and value that version of you. So if someone is not vibing with what you have to offer, then they can go somewhere else. Do not conform to other people's expectations of you. Live your best life and do the most. If that's what you want to do, just do it. Do you prefer to live in the city or countryside? I've personally never lived in the countryside, but I know for sure that I am a city person, and I don't think I need to live in the countryside to know that. I like seeing lots of my friends, trying out new restaurants, experiencing nightlife, going to concerts and events. So, basically all of the things that seem like they'd be really difficult to access when you live in the countryside. Do you have any songs you'd recommend to get in the artsy mood? I don't have any music preferences in relation to art. I'll just listen to whatever I'm in the mood for at any given moment. Who's your bias in BTS? I think I've probably talked about this before, but it's Jungkook, he's had my heart since the beginning, but I have now discovered in K-pop terms that Jimin is my bias wrecker. What's your favorite BTS album / track? This is often changing depending on when you ask me, but my cop-out response for favorite album is Love Yourself Answer, which is technically a compilation, not an official album. And then for my favorite track, according to Spotify, my most listened to song of all 2021 was Euphoria, which feels a little blasphemous to say is my favorite BTS song because it's a Jungkook solo song, but I will admit I really do love that song and I will never skip it when it comes on. Are you reading the new BTS webtoon, and have you listened to the song by Suga and Jungkook? Yes to all of the above. I was pleasantly surprised when I heard BTS was collaborating with webtoon. It really felt like my two worlds were colliding. And I've been really enjoying the series so far, and of course I love this song. Have any new K-pop groups caught your eye yet? I have mentioned them, I think, in the previous Q&A as well, but I've been really enjoying Stray Kids. I haven't, consumed nearly as much Stray Kids content as I have with BTS, but I have been really enjoying the Noisy/Noisy album a lot, and I'm really looking forward to their comeback. The teasers have been insane. They really went all out. The costume, the sets, the budget, insane. Favorite album right now? It's not technically, the whole album hasn't been out yet, but I've been listening to all of the new tracks from Charli XCX's album Crash, so I'm sure I'll really enjoy the rest when it all comes out. And I've also been really enjoying Conan Gray as well. Are you excited for the upcoming Stranger Things season 4? I feel a little bad saying this, but not really. I absolutely loved the first season, and then I think my excitement for the series over time has just slowly started to fizzle out. Plus, it's been ages since the third season, obviously, due to pandemic stuff, but I'm sure I will happily enjoy the fourth season, and I will watch it when it comes out. So I just feel like I'm not as excited about it as I am with other series. What do you think of the show Gilmore Girls? I love Gilmore Girls. I've rewatched it many times, particularly the first few seasons because I'm Team Jess all the way. It's certainly a show that is far from perfect, but generally it's just such a comfort show for me with how wholesome, cozy, and nostalgic it is. I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea. Mainly people's complaint with it is the really fast dialogue and how often they reference things in said dialogue. People saying that it's not realistic, but isn't that the point of TV? It doesn't have to be realistic. Anyway, I think that the dialogue and pop culture references is really fun and definitely adds to the charm of the show and what sets it apart. So anyway, I love it. It's on Netflix if you have never seen it and are curious about it. Have you ever watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Would you ever consider making fan art for it? Lord of the Rings is probably one of my favorite film series of all time. It's an absolute classic and I watch it almost annually. I feel like very few trilogies are really strong all the way through. And even though these movies came out in the early 2000s, they still look incredible and I still enjoy them every time I watch it. In terms of actual fan art, though, I feel like the vibe of the series just doesn't really make sense with my work, but maybe I'll consider drawing Legolas or Aragorn in my sketchbook for a 6 fan arts thing or something like that. Favorite creature on Gravity Falls? I don't know if this would be my favorite creature on the show, but I do really love the episode where Mabel has a boyfriend temporarily who ends up being a zombie. I just thought it was so funny because I think it's framed to be initially they think he's a hot vampire, but then he ends up being an undead, which I just thought was so funny. What fictional character has similar fashion tastes as you? This is such a fun question, but I will say I can't pinpoint a specific character, but I'd say that the overall fashion in the original Sailor Moon series is really iconic, and I feel like my fashion sense is probably a result of growing up with this series. I, of course, love all the pastel 90s fashion, but I also love the bad bitch energy from the villains as well. So, both sides of my fashion sensibility is showcased here. Have you seen Turning Red? The aesthetic reminds me so much of your art. Yes, I loved this movie. I really felt like it was a love letter to being a young, nerdy Asian girl living in Toronto in the early 2000s, and there were so many elements about it that I really related to. I didn't grow up in Toronto specifically, but I loved seeing all the Toronto references since it's not something that I commonly see, especially it being a Pixar movie, which is very cool. And yeah, overall, there was so many refreshing elements to the movie that I really appreciated, like the dynamic with May and her mom, the unapologetic fangirling with her friends, and oh my gosh, May drawing the hot anime boy art was hilarious and just too real. What's your favorite animated movie that isn't Studio Ghibli? Maybe this is a cliche answer, but if not Studio Ghibli, I would have to go with a Disney movie from the 90s. Those movies were hugely influential to me growing up, and I still enjoy them so much to this day. So my answer changes every so often, but if I were to narrow it down right now, my favorites are Mulan and Hercules. They just really stand out for me in terms of the story, the music, and the style of animation. If there was one TV show/movie you could watch again for the first time, what would it be? I think I have to go with Avatar: The Last Airbender, mainly because it's one of my favorite series of all time. And when I originally watched it, I was watching it as it was airing on TV. Back in the day when there weren't streaming platforms, and so you actually had to tune in every week to catch it on cable television. So I'm positive I probably missed episodes upon my first watch. And, that obviously disrupts the flow of the story. So it would be amazing to be able to experience it again for the first time, but with a more consistent viewing. Do you have any comfort characters? I don't know if I would say comfort characters specifically, but I definitely have comfort shows. That make me feel happy and uplift my mood when I'm down. So unsurprisingly, of course, one of them having to be Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as Ouran High School Host Club, Haikyuu, and this technically does not fall under the fictional category, but since last year, I have been watching a ton of BTS Run, which is this variety show that BTS does, and it brings me an immense amount of joy and comfort. And especially last year when I was feeling really down and when I was really stressed out, I really, really thrived on watching this show to kind of unravel my kind of nerves and stuff. My friend Joey asks, Bang, Marry, Kill, Vox Machina edition. So to preface this, I have only seen the new animated TV show, which I loved, by the way, but I understand that it's perhaps a more limited understanding of these characters compared to those who have followed the actual Critical Role campaign. But that being said, Bang Percy, because he's definitely got a lot of intrigue with his dark past and stoic attitude, but because of those things, I don't think he would be an ideal husband. Marry Vax, because he seems so sweet and I feel like he would treat you really, really well as, a partner. And I mean, I'm a sucker for dark hair, so, And then Kill Scanlan. Sorry about it. I know he's, good for comedic relief, which is obviously important for the dynamic of the crew, but if I knew him in real life, he would drive me insane. Have you ever felt ashamed about liking anime/manga? Oh, for sure. particularly when I was in high school. I'm going to sound like an old lady when I say this, but back in my day, anime was nowhere near as mainstream as it is today. I mean, obviously, anime is still a little bit of a niche interest, but it's way more common knowledge in comparison to when I was a teenager. So naturally, advertising that you were into anime was just asking to be labeled as weird. And so I really didn't talk about it out loud very often. However, in art class, I couldn't help but have tons of anime fan art drawings in my sketchbooks. So it was kind of inevitable that people would know. But yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, something that I appreciate about getting older is that now I no longer feel ashamed for just unapologetically enjoying certain things, which includes anime and manga. So yeah, life is just too short to worry about what other people think and to prevent yourself from enjoying certain things. So just live your life, man. If you could sit with 5 female mangaka, who would it be? So first, I of course have to say Nako Takuichi, who created Sailor Moon. I don't think it needs an explanation. It's iconic. Next, I would say Clamp, which is a group of women who created tons of series, but notably for me, Cardcaptor Sakura, which similarly with Sailor Moon, it was such a formative and influential series in my young life. So I love both of those series so much. Next would be Hiromu Arakawa, who created Full Metal Alchemist, which is one of my favorite series of all time. I think that the way that the story and the world and everything about it is just so well done. And then next we've got Ai Yazawa, who created Nana. I haven't really visited this series since high school, but I absolutely adored this series, and she actually went on hiatus. She never finished the series, and so I would love to know how it ends because I was so attached to these characters, but also her fashion and style in this series as well is so good. And then lastly, Koyaharu Gotoge. I'm so sorry, I'm sure I said all these names wrong, but they created Demon Slayer, which of course is a newer series that I really love, and the style and the universe that she built is amazing. So yeah, all of these creators are incredible. 10 out of 10 across the board. Who are some of your favorite anime characters? This is such a hard question because I have so many characters that I love, but honestly right now I'm just gonna say half the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't know what it is, but I just get so excited about these characters, maybe because it's a newer series, but I'm going to be seeing the movie tomorrow and I'm so excited, so that's probably why that's the only kind of characters that are really coming to mind right now. Who are some of your favorite anime villains? I really love Greed when he's inhabiting Ling in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, who, spoiler alert, ends up being more of an anti-hero towards the final episode, so I'm not sure if he entirely counts as a villain, but I love him. And then bringing it back to Jujutsu Kaisen, I admittedly kind of love Sukuna. He has a certain charisma about him with his very brazen personality, and I am also very intrigued by Geto as well. So yeah, I have read the manga, so I am past the first season of the anime in terms of the story, but I'm not actually caught up with the manga, so I'm sure my opinion of these characters might change, but right now I'm finding them very intriguing. And then also, I wanted to mention that perhaps my favorite villain, who technically is not from an anime, is Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. She is cold, calculating, a little crazy, and she has such an interesting arc throughout the series. Are you enjoying Demon Slayer Season 2? I watched both the Mugen Train arc movie and the TV show episodes of that arc, and I may or may not have cried both times. Needless to say, I loved it, and Rengoku is a very cool character. As for the Entertainment District arc, I am living for it. I'm not caught up on it, but I definitely have been really enjoying it, and I think it is serving a very much needed humorous tone following the Mugen Train arc. And there has been so many cases where it has made me genuinely laugh so hard out loud. And I also think that the backdrop of having the nightlife for this arc is really, really interesting and a nice change up from what we've seen before. And of course, I am ready to volunteer as tribute to be Tengen's fourth wife. What do you think of Attack on Titan so far? I'm really enjoying it. I currently am just about to finish season 3, and I went into it knowing that it was going to be pretty dramatic, but there were definitely some really good twists and betrayals that were both fun and stressful to watch. And I was expecting to like Levi because I heard so much about him, which, you know, he really is a short king, and I do really enjoy him and understand why people love him so much. But I was surprised to find myself really loving Jean. I think I can definitely say he's my favorite character. I just really like his character arc. And for our last question, any movies or series that you can't wait for? I'm really looking forward to season 3 of The Umbrella Academy. It's such a fun series, and I'm really interested to see what the Sparrow Academy is going to be like. I do worry about how they're going to juggle all these characters though, because I find that the curse that happens with a lot of series is that they introduce all of these new characters and then we see less and less of the OGs that we've come to know and love. But hopefully they do a good job at balancing them all out, and the main Umbrella Academy is still the star of the show. And then secondly, I am extremely excited for the final season of Bleach to come out in October. I was seriously obsessed with this series back in high school, and it was such a shame that they never finished the anime, but I feel like it was a blessing in disguise because now with how far animation has come, I think it has the potential to be even cooler and just so much more dynamic. And with that, we're at the end of today's video. I hope that you had fun listening to me answer your questions and that I made for some good company. If you enjoy this type of video, I'll have the link of the playlist of the previous ones on the screen for you. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone who purchased from my shop. It's really going to help me out with my move. And lastly, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!